Hey everyone, it's Chris from ChrisBeatCancer.com, and today I have a very, very special guest on the show. This is Jeanette Murray Wakeland. Did I pronounce your name right?
You did.
Okay, wonderful. So Jeanette is a pretty amazing woman. I cannot wait to get into her story, but let me just give you the brief overview so that you'll stick around for the whole interview because we got a lot of awesome stuff to talk about. But first of all, she's a chemo-free cancer survivor, number one. She's a raw foodist, and she is an ultra runner. She and her husband ran 366 consecutive marathons. They ran a marathon every single day for 366 days. Like, that is absolutely mind-blowing to me, and I can't wait to talk about this with her. But anyway, so Jeanette, thank you so much for doing this interview.
No, you're very welcome.
And so let's start with your cancer story. Tell me your cancer story.
Well, it was about 13 years ago now that I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And basically I was given 6 months to live. I was offered chemotherapy and radiation, and that didn't make sense to me.
So was it stage 3 or 4?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Stage 3?
Yeah, and it was aggressive carcinoma. And basically it was like, okay, you know, they just said, well, we can give you chemotherapy and radiation and you might get another 6 months, but nothing guaranteed. And so that to me didn't make sense.
That's not very encouraging.
No, I mean, if I was already compromised, why would I compromise myself further so that I get another 6 months of being sick?
Right.
And I wasn't sick at the time. It was.
You didn't feel sick?
No, not at all. I had, discovered the lump, and so once the biopsy was done and they confirmed that it was cancer, then that was the prognosis.
What do you think the difference was between you and the typical cancer patient who, same diagnosis, who is just quickly allows themselves to be rushed into treatment?
I mean, just intuitively, I thought, well, why would you do something that's going to compromise the body further? But I listened to everything that they had to say and what they had to offer. And the more they told me, the less it made sense to me. And I think for a lot of people, though, it's very fear-driven. So when you're there with the oncologist and they're basically saying, look, if you don't do this, you're going to die in 6 months. And I said, well, if I, like you're telling me I've got 6 months to live anyway, so if I don't do it, maybe I've got longer. Who knows? I think most people just kind of go with what the doctor says because they don't realize that they can take responsibility or control themselves for themselves. And that's one of the reasons why I've been doing what I've been doing with writing the book and trying to, show by example what's possible.
Your first book is called Raw Can Cure Cancer.
Yes.
And I'll put a link to it below the video just for anyone that wants to buy it. They can just click right through. Something you said I wanted to ask you about. Were you afraid?
I don't think that's the word for me. I think I was
concerned.
No, I think the word's
happy.
I don't think I can say the word. I think the word is more. The feeling was more like, well, why me?
Yeah.
And I basically said that to the doctor, and they said, oh, well, everybody says that, and. But it wasn't just saying it. It was more like, that's, like I've always felt like I've had a healthy life. I was vegetarian at the time, had been most of my life, and I was really active and lived in a pretty clean environment. And it just didn't, I just was like, okay, what's the deal here? How come? And then it was more like I was told how many people get breast cancer, and at the time it was 1 in 9, and I thought that was a pretty big scale. So I thought of all the women in my family, and there is no history of cancer in my family. But I thought of all the women, and it came to 9. And I thought, okay, here's the deal. I get the cancer so that I can save the rest. Or not exactly that, but more, okay, so, what if I can turn that around?
Had you seen anyone do it before? I mean, obviously you said you were already into health and you were,
Yes.
you were into healthy living. So had you read stories or heard testimonials of anyone else healing before, healing cancer that you drew from?
Yeah, not at that very time, but then I started doing the research, and there were a lot of people, even then, that had, made the choice of not to do the traditional or treatment and had been successful.
What were
And then
some
I
of the
started
books
looking into other, studies that at the time, there weren't that many then. There, of course, there's hundreds now and
yeah.
hundreds of cases now, where, there was definitely evidence that the mortality rate wasn't necessarily going to be exactly what the prognosis was, depending on what you did. And it seemed to me that, if it was my mistake, if it was my, however it was that I got to have cancer, then it was up to me to do something about it. And also the fact that I knew my body was capable of it. It's just that it had been compromised in a way that, it was giving me a message more than my being, okay, you're going to die in 6 months. It was more like a message that, okay, you need to do something in the next 6 months to make a difference. And so from there, I went on to do the research and find out everything I could. And the more research I did, the more it didn't make sense to go down that conventional route at all.
What were some of the sources that you found back then? Some of the people or books that you read that were the most influential and helpful?
I think the book that was most influential was The Bruce Cancer Cure. And
yeah, that's Dr. Rudolph Bruce. Yes,
exactly,
I'll put a link to that book below the video.
And that was pretty much it for anything so-called alternative at the time. There were quite a few accounts of various different people that had, done alternative treatment. And I just started researching everything, first of all, that was offered to me. And so the treatment, and at the time there'd been studies on that particular drug and that sort of thing. And the more I read and the smaller the print got, the more it became obvious that this was not the thing to do, to just compromise it further. So from that point of view, then I realized, well, then I need to help the body because it's obviously in trouble, trying to get ahead of the game. And so the most sense that it made to me was, well, what can I put into my body that's going to make a difference? Putting drugs in didn't make sense. So putting in really high nutrient-laden food made sense. And that's, I was already vegetarian, but I just cut out all everything other than fruits and vegetables, which are, give you the most nutrients, and living food. Because when you heat or cook food, of course, you lose some of the nutrients and all of the enzymes which you need to assimilate the nutrients from the food. So that also just totally made sense. And also just looking at the animal kingdom. In my research, I found that, and you really don't need to research this, you just need to think about it, really, is the fact that animals in their natural state, not those that we've domesticated, but in their natural wild state, they don't have all these things that we have. They don't, they don't go to a hospital. They don't even have to go to a university or to a school to find out what to do. Yeah. They know what to do.
They have microwaves.
Yeah, exactly. So they, so I thought, well, if, animals can take care of themselves, we're an animal. Why can't we take care of ourselves? Why is it that we're, in such a state of ill health? And it became obvious to me that the way to go was a natural way. So, the more research I did, the more I tried different things. And the Bruce Cancer Cure came up very quickly because it's, it's been around for a long time. And so I did that. So that was a 42-day juice fast, basically.
Yeah, you did the 42-day. That's amazing. That's great.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it made sense. well, also because it was 42 and I was into marathons at the time, so 42 kilometers is a marathon, and I thought, okay, well, that must be I'm meant to do that.
Yeah.
So, and then I got in touch with a naturopathic physician who was, luckily for me, living in my area, and I knew him personally as well as a friend. So we put together a therapy, if you like, that was going to help to kickstart the immune system back into reversing and healing.
For anybody that doesn't understand like what we're talking about, the Bruce Cancer Cure is a 42-day juice fast. And can you describe the juice that you're drinking every day for 42 days?
Yeah. For me, well, it depends with the Bruce Cancer Cure. It does depend on the cancer that you have and the stage and so on as to what the components are. And it's not very complicated, but for me, all I really needed to have was beetroot, anything from the brassica family, so cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, anything like that, and you just basically juice those greens.
Did you do potato juice?
And it wasn't necessary for me to do potato juice, so that was part of it that I didn't do. And then there was some herbs that were part of it as well. There was sage and a few other herbs that you have. And I think the key to the juice fast was that you make the juice and then you sip it all day long. So you don't drink the whole juice. You just have a little bit, a little sip throughout the day, and it's all you have, that and the herb juice. So you don't have
juices. What was the volume of juice that you drank per day? Maybe 8 cups, 12 cups?
It was very small. So it was probably just under a liter.
Okay.
So it sounds like it's, oh, that's not enough. But because you're sipping it throughout the day, the whole idea of the Bruce Cancer Cure is that you're starving the cancer, but having enough nutrients to keep the body going. So it's almost like you're killing the cancer, but not yourself. And the interesting thing about this was that I noticed was that I had more energy. And I mean, basically the Bruce Cancer Cure says, well, you shouldn't be doing anything else. You shouldn't be working. You should be just resting while you're doing this because, this is going to zap your energy. But I found it was the opposite. And I was actually going crazy doing all kinds of things. And I was working at the time as well, physically working. And my job was a physical job. And so I just found that it was fantastic. And so I was only having about approximately a liter a day. And so I did that. But I also, at the same time, was doing the therapy that I was doing with my naturopathic physician. Basically, I was going for everything.
So what happened after the 42 days? Then what did your day or your diet look like?
After that, I just increased the ingredients in my juices. So I was basically juicing for, probably up to about 18 months, where I was pretty much all the food that I was the intake was through juice so that I could get more of it, more nutrients by juicing. And so I researched the Gerson therapy as well. And I based a lot of my juicing on their recipes and their theories. So a high amount of carrots and beetroot, some green apple, and that was pretty much it. And then on top of that, again, I was doing wheatgrass juice. So I discovered the whole benefits of wheatgrass, which are absolutely phenomenal. And that was, looking at the research that Dr. Ann Wigmore had done in the past. And so I included wheatgrass juice as well. So it's mainly juicing and wheatgrass that I was doing.
So much in common because what I did was I drank 64 ounces of juice a day. It was carrot, beetroot, celery, little ginger root, lots of wheatgrass shots, right?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same as me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Gerson and Bruce are sort of more incredible pioneers and have influenced so many people, and Ann Wigmore as well. And I'm very thankful for those people.
Yeah, and the thing too that's important for people to understand is a juice fast or a juice feast or whatever you want to call it is just, like having juice. The idea of it is to let the body heal while it's still getting nutrients and the most amount of nutrients out of the most amount of food. So, for instance, with carrots, carrots, really good for building the immune system and helping the immune system because of the provitamin A that it contains. But it's very hard to eat a lot of carrots in a day. Chomp, chomp, chomp through a carrot. Pretty much by the time you've had one carrot, you kind of feel satiated.
Yeah.
Whereas you juice them, just a small, not even, maybe one glass of juice, that's more like a kilo of carrots. So, or a pound of carrots. Half a pound of carrots.
Right.
So you can get a lot more in by juicing, and that's the idea of juicing, is to get more into the body quicker and in a way that the body can deal with it, because it's basically going straight into your blood system, your bloodstream. And so the body doesn't have to do any digesting. The juice has done that for it. And so it's easier on the body, and it's able to just take those nutrients and start the healing process.
Yeah, it's a very quick source of energy and nutrition.
Exactly.
And a lot of, there's sort of a standard, very common protocol when people are healing cancer. If they're juicing carrots, they usually juice about 5 pounds a day, which obviously we're in, we're in different, you're in metric, and I'm in America, the only country in the world that has their own system of measurement. But anyway,
yes. Sorry.
So no, this is terrific. This is so good. And I know people watching this are going to be really excited just to know that, hey, there's someone else that has done it. Why do you think you developed cancer? Because you had a pretty healthy lifestyle. You're very health conscious and eating vegetarian and things like that. So looking back and thinking about it, what were the factors involved that you think really contributed to cancer developing in your body?
It was environmental, for sure. And most breast cancer is either environmental outside the body or inside the body. So, in other words, inside the body, it's stress, high stress levels.
Yeah.
For me, I didn't have very many, that much in the way of stress levels, but I was compromised by being in the wrong place at the right time, or maybe the right place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
One of those incidents was actually an accident. So I was accidentally exposed to high chemical substances. And of course, your skin is the biggest organ in the body. So having chemicals on my skin was very compromising to the body. And another situation that I was in was literally being in a place where I was exposed to very high toxic levels of pollution. Put it that way.
Yeah, toxic environmental pollution causes cancer. We all know it, and we live in a world with 80,000 plus man-made chemicals, and with various degrees of toxicity, and so a healthy diet is only one piece of the puzzle, right?
Absolutely,
and it's a very important piece, right? Diet, your lifestyle choices, stress, and environmental toxins. Those are really the major cancer causers in the world. And the great thing is only about 2% of cancer is genetic, so that's really not a factor for most people. But what I was going to say is the great thing is that those are all factors that we can control. We have choices about our diet and our lifestyle and our stress levels and to some extent environmental pollution. I mean, you can protect yourself to some extent, but sometimes, like in your case, there are extraneous circumstances, right?
Yeah, but I'm sure that because I was already vegetarian, so, to that level of, having a relatively healthy diet, I'm sure that helped my body give me the message sooner and was able to respond quicker with, with what I then started to do. If I had not had that healthy background with diet as well as physical exercise, it would have been more difficult for me to, or it may have taken longer for the body to be able to respond, which again makes sense. But it's never too late. You can never start sooner to make those changes. And what I found over the years, like certainly at the beginning, a lot of it was to do with, okay, I got to get this sorted real quick, and so there was a lot of intensive therapy going on, as well as my diet. And one of the things that I was told by the doctors was to take it easy, don't stop running, stop doing all this exercise because it'll just make it worse. So the first thing I did was increase the distance and increase the amount of running I was doing.
Yes, you went completely against your doctor's advice.
Absolutely. Whatever the doctor tells you, basically. No, it's not quite like that. But what I knew for sure was that the cancer cells can't exist in an oxygenated environment. So because my body, the environment of my body itself, had been compromised to not have enough oxygen, then the mutations had started being in the right environment to be able to do that. So I needed to increase the oxygen in my body. So I did that in various different ways.
So
and
let me interrupt. Let me interrupt. Were you concerned? I mean, obviously, maybe you weren't, but did you think about the fact that we know that exercise is very beneficial, right? Very, very, very beneficial. And some would say to a point, and then that there's a point to which it could be detrimental because of the increased catabolic stress on the body and increased production of lactic acid and just the increased physical stress on the body. So what were your thoughts about those things during this time when you decided I'm going to exercise more versus less?
Well, I mean, I was still thinking sensibly in that I wasn't going to over train or over exercise. I was going to do what my body was capable of at the time, which I've always done. So I've never been a competitive runner, if you like to put it that way, where I've really pushed myself to the limits. But then maybe I have. Who knows what your limits really are? But I've never pushed myself beyond the limits to a point of putting my body in a position that it was compromised. So no, I just did what I felt was right at the time. And luckily for me, I was living in an area where there was some beautiful countryside, and I was able to go up and run up into the mountains and into the forest where the air was clean, run along the beach where it was, again, it was more oxygen into the body. And the other things that I did for getting the oxygen in was, of course, the wheatgrass and greens, because there's a lot of oxygen from the chlorophyll straight into the bloodstream, but also just conscious breathing. So, actually consciously breathing and bringing in, getting rid of the air out of the lungs and taking in really good air. So, so those were things that I did, as well as various other meditation, yoga, going within and really connecting with my inner self and understanding that I was worth it. So, a lot of another thing that I've come to realize over the years has been that for most people, they don't place a high enough value on themselves to think that they're worth going to all this, doing all this that they need to do to be healthy and to be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they spend most of their lives, especially women, being the carers of everybody else and everything else.
Yeah.
And, we need to bring that back to caring for yourself first. And it sounds like it's selfish, but it totally isn't. It's sensible, for one thing. And then it's also helpful to other people because, well, as a mother or a grandmother or a teacher or whatever, you're able to show by example.
That's right. Well, and if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be around to take care of people that need your help, that need you.
Exactly.
And so I love what you said, because I've said it myself. If you have cancer, this is an okay time to be selfish, because a lot of people that have cancer have spent most of their life focusing on meeting the needs of others to the detriment and neglect of their own health.
That's right.
So, and you touched on this, but there are emotions, a lot of emotional baggage that some of us carry that are, self-doubt and self-loathing and even self-hatred. If you're really insecure and unhappy and you hate yourself, you beat yourself up for your mistakes in the past, and Maybe your life didn't turn out the way you thought, or you know, there's so many things that can go through your mind. But when you have those really strong emotions that are depressing, and they can lead you to feel worthless and unworthy, and like,
That's right.
you know, you're not worth it.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at it, you know, just from a purely logical or even technical way, the body has a pH balance and of alkaline and acid, and if you stay with that in everything you do, so it's not just the food that you take in, which you know should all be at least 80% alkaline. But it's also your thoughts and your actions can be acid forming in the body, and obviously forming is not what we want. So you know, being angry or sad or you know, hatred and all those negative emotions are all acid forming in the body, so they're going to compromise the body. So what we need to be looking for is to be happy and healthy, and then you're totally alkaline. And if you have that perfect balance of alkaline and acid in the body, you cannot be sick. You can't be unhealthy. That is being healthy and in a state of optimal health. So that's where I was heading, and you know, and I just kept that in mind all the time. Just keep heading in that direction, and I think I got there.
It sounds like you got there. Well, and you're right. All negative emotions produce stress and acidity in the body, and they're immunosuppressants. Stress suppresses your immune system and promotes disease. And short-term stress is really not a big threat for people, you know, like being chased by a tiger, but it's the long-term, daily, chronic stress that's so destructive.
That's right. Yeah, and you know, the way that our culture or a non-culture, if you like, is taking us into this very fast, technical driven world where we're just sort of, you know, heading. It's like we're really taking the human race literally, and we're racing somewhere, but we're not really sure where we're going, and we're definitely not winning.
That's
so,
right.
You know, we're better to come back to being human beings and be ourselves and realize who we are and why we're here, and also for our species and our to be humankind rather than the human race. So thinking more in a kind and compassionate way, and for ourselves and for each other and for the animals and for the planet. Like, if we start to come back to that that kind, compassionate way, then things will change, and health will change, and we'll all, you know, come back to a better space.
Great words of wisdom. So in our next video, we're going to talk about your incredible marathon achievement, just mega marathon achievement.
Mm-hmm.